Welcome, NASCAR, Live in the Fast Lane, Wager Talk TV, and we're going to look at the third to final race, the middle race of the round of 8 in the NASCAR playoffs for this Sunday afternoon at Kansas, the Hollywood Casino 400. And the word casino is in the title, boys, so we get to talk about betting odds, which we do every week. But it always cracked me up. They used to never show the odds except for the Las Vegas race. Now they're more comfortable with it. But let's go racing, Kansas style. Another cookie cutter, 1.5 intermediate track, just like we had last week at Texas. So I'm going to throw it to my two co-hosts, Rocky Atkinson, SportsMemo.com, Andy Lang, WagerTalk.com. I'm, of course, Steve Merril, WagerTalk.com as well. And we always do the Rocky recap. But, Rocky, I think you could definitely say last week's race, Texas, is an important one to recap because it's almost the exact same type of track that we're going to see this week in Kansas. So let's have the Rocky recap from last week, the first of the round of 8 races.
Sounds good, Steve. Yeah, the hottest driver in the Cup Series this year, Kyle Larson. He wins his 8th race of the year, secures a spot in the championship round in Phoenix, and well deserved. I mean, he's outrun everybody this year. He dominated, leading 256 out of 334 laps this past weekend. William Byron finished second. He's been running good. Kind of hate to see him out of the running in the playoffs with the way he's running here the last few weeks again. Christopher Bell finished third. Keselowski finished fourth. Kevin Harvick in fifth. Ryan Blaney finished sixth. Chase Elliott seventh. Kyle Busch eighth. Tyler Reddick ninth. And he's been running good as well. And Daniel Suarez had a top 10 finish. Kyle Busch won stage 1. Kyle Larson won stage 2. The playoff standings are as follows. Kyle Larson leads. Like I said, he's locked into the championship race now. Ryan Blaney sits in second. Denny Hamlin third. Kyle Busch is in the 4th position. Chase Elliott is the first one out in 5th. He's 8 points out of 4th. Brad Keselowski's in 6th. He's 15 points out of 4th. Martin Truex Jr. is in 7th, 22 points out of the 4th and final spot. And Joey Logano sits in 8th right now, 43 points behind the 4th place car. Just 3 more races until the season's over. We head to Kansas this week. Then they'll follow that up with Martinsville, and then they'll head to the final race for the championship in Phoenix. So it should be a fun final 3 races for sure.
Yeah, once again, I mean, this is an identical type of 1.5-mile cookie cutter intermediate speedway like we saw last week. And William Byron had been very good on those tracks this year, and he did show some speed last week. Kyle Larson, of course, dominated those. You said, Rocky. The two combined led over 300 laps. Kyle Busch led 20. Nobody else even basically led more than 2 laps in the entire race. Andy Lang, WagerTalk.com. Let's go, Andy. What do we got for the Stenhouse Award here? I mean, obviously, as Rocky said, a lot of contenders were taken out of maybe playoff contention unless they win here in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, I actually jotted down 3 of them that were good nominees. First off, we had that huge crash at the beginning involving none other than the number 23 car, who we've had a lot of fun with over the year. So we had the big crash, and then Rocky mentions Daniel Suarez gets little top 10. All you got to do is little nudge to Truex, get him out of the way, get yourself a top 10, taking out one of the playoff contenders. And then I love NASCAR announcers when you compare them to other sports, and sometimes they can come across really clueless. So I just got a real kick out of them pretending that Byron was going to challenge Larson for the lead at the end. They were like, and you wonder how hard William Byron's going to race Larson for the win. It's like, he's not, guys. If he gets within a car length, there's going to be a big loud voice of Rick Hendrick over the radio saying, stay back. Don't you even think about it. So at least in Formula One, they acknowledge the team orders and everything. But to think that William Byron was even going to get near Kyle Larson to challenge for the win was laughable, but the announcers attempting to make it very exciting and build up the suspense was pretty good. So yeah, 3 good ones. It was a really entertaining race. Boy, Larson is just on an absolute tear. And I looked up, I was like, man, how many wins? Like, what's the record for most wins in a NASCAR season? And it's one of the most unbelievable, unbreakable records ever. I don't know if you guys know this. Most wins in a NASCAR season is 27. by Richard Petty. He raced 48 times and won 27 races. So that's going to be one of those records I don't think is going to be broken anytime soon. So unbelievable how good that guy was. And this Kyle Larson, this is just an all-time season he's putting together right now.
Yeah, it was definitely a different era. That's back when they took like 30-second, 45-second pit stops. They'd have a smoke, a can of beer, and a can of Sunoco 76. And I was going to say, I think Ryan Newman had 8. Carl Edwards maybe had 8 recently, like in the last couple of decades. That's probably – did you see anything recent, Andy, as far as most wins? Was it around 8 or 9, I think?
No. Once you go back, yeah, you can see some. Dale Earnhardt had a couple of good seasons, but yeah, now with everything so competitive at the top, it's gonna be hard. I mean, if maybe Larson can get to 10, maybe he can get double digits. The track's set up pretty nice for him. No restrictor plate races, but yeah, Richard Petty at 27 is pretty amazing.
Yeah, and by the way, the in-game odds, I did check those with about 30 to go, and he was like minus 300. And then with the reset with a few to go, he was still minus 300. I mean, Byron, he might have been like 4 to 1, but like guys like Blaney were like 12 to 1, 14. I mean, they were guys that you would have thought pre-race were in contention. The odds makers knew exactly what was going on, and they knew Larson wasn't going to lose that race because, first of all, he's running for the championship. As he said, Byron's a teammate who's not going to take him out, who's out of contention. The in-game betting markets had him at minus 300, basically. So, they were on top of that. Let's transition over to Kansas. Once again, we leave Texas a 1.5 mile intermediate and we go right to another one. So I really don't see why too much would change this week. Rocky, start us off. Do you think differently? Is there someone maybe you're looking at differently this week, or is it the usual suspects here for Kansas?
Yeah, it's pretty much the usual suspects for me. I think it's the exact same top 3 that I had last week, actually. And I'm going to start off with Kyle Busch again. He run good again this past weekend. He's back to running kind of like the old Kyle Busch. But his numbers here at this track, he has 2 wins, 9 top 5s, 13 top 10 finishes in 27 races here in Kansas. Average finish is 15.1 at this track. Over the past 3 years here, he has 1 win, 4 top 5s, 5 top 10s in those 7 races. Solid average finish at 8.8. He has the 3rd best driver rating here the past 3 years, behind only Kevin Harvick and Kyle Larson. I'm looking for Kyle Busch to do well and run good this weekend.
Yeah, and obviously Kyle Busch is a guy that's been very good on these type of tracks, and he's a guy that had a little bit of difficulty last week with the overall finish, but as I said, he led the 3rd most laps with 20 laps led, was 3rd best in the race last week. Andy, what about you? Any different approach this week? Do you see something different about Kansas that maybe doesn't correlate to Texas, or is it going to kind of be the same approach for you as well?
I would love to come on and say, oh, it's going to be completely different. I got a bunch of different sleepers, but like you said, this track is just very, very similar. You're going to see a lot of the same guys. I will say I really like what's happening with Brad Keselowski in that team, so I got him as a guy to really keep your eye on. He's really coming on strong at the end of the season. 4th at Texas, 2nd at Talladega, 7th at Las Vegas, 6th at Bristol, 7th at Darlington, 9th at Michigan. So he's consistently finishing in that top 10, around the top 5 on these bigger tracks. He finished 3rd here earlier this season. He's really on the uptrend. And, like we always talk about, we call him the ninja. I wouldn't put it past him to have a trick up a sleeve. He's the best at getting a win when he doesn't necessarily have the best car. So if we get a chance at a pit stop strategy, he really could be there. And he's going to be there late if he stays out of trouble. So I would keep my eye on him. The Penske cars are all running good. So he's got really good momentum with his team, momentum as a driver. So Brad is a guy I'm going to keep my eye on for sure.
Yeah, and Keselowski had a solid 4th place finish last week at Texas, and he was 10th and 5th in the first 2 stages. So he was a legitimate top 5 car there. And he is still, we talk about him leaving the team, starting his own team next year or whatnot, being a co-owner. But he's not a dead duck. I mean, he's sitting 6th right now in the playoff points. He's only 15 behind that 4th spot, which is Kyle Busch, by the way, who we also mentioned. So I think you not only look at the usual suspects, you have to look at these playoff drivers. We say that every year. These final few races, like you said with Larson last week, they're not going to take out a contender. They're going to race them with respect, and it's not a coincidence that basically every year we've had this format that the top 4 finish 1, 2, 3, 4 in the Miami race, now the Phoenix race. So you got to look at these guys that are in the playoff standings, and Kyle Busch, Keselowski both check those boxes. Rocky Atkinson, sportsmemo.com. Rocky, who's somebody else you got in the top 3?
I've got to mention a guy who's been probably the second best driver on the circuit this year. He's really been consistent. Denny Hamlin, he stepped up when it was playoff time. He said it was time to go, and he did. He started winning a couple races there. But here in Kansas, he has 3 wins, 8 top fives, 9 top tens, and 26 races here. Average finish 14.4 at this track. And over the past 3 years here, he has 2 wins, 3 top fives, 3 top tens in those 7 races. Average finish of 9.1. I'm looking for Hamlin to run well this weekend.
Yeah, for those of us, I should say, that like to join NASCAR contests, pay money without any opportunity to win money back, you have to put in 4 drivers. And my 5th driver that I cut last week was Hamlin, guys. I was on the borderline between Blaney and Hamlin as my 4th. And my goal is to always make Andy giggle. I didn't do it last week. I was trying to do it last week with the intro, but it didn't work. But I was trying to get a giggle this week, Andy, and I got that. Rob Bean will be on deck next when I do a show with him. He's my other giggle guy. But Hamlin was the 5th guy I cut, was my 5th guy on the outside looking in last week. And, Rocky, when I went back and looked, he hasn't been as dominant as I thought on these intermediates. And like last week is another, 11th place finish, ran 7th in both stages, led 2 laps. So he wasn't definitely a top 5 car last week, but he has been in general very good on these tracks. So we'll see if Hamlin gets it done. And I throw it over to Andy Lang. The Gigglethon continues. Andy, who's somebody else you're looking at here for your second pick?
I'm actually going to go to a non-playoff driver here, Tyler Reddick. As far as bets go and daily fantasy, this guy's about as valuable as it gets. He's winning his head-to-head matchups. 3 top 10 finishes at Texas, Charlotte, and Las Vegas. These tracks are very similar to Kansas, and there's only 4 drivers that have finished top 10 in all 3 of those races. He's one of them. The other 3 are playoff drivers. So if you're looking at head-to-head matchups, this guy has been one of the best non-playoff drivers the last couple races. So I would look to Tyler Reddick. He'd be a really good one in daily fantasy as well. So, yeah, Tyler Reddick's going to make my card as well. I hope to get a really, really solid head-to-head with him.
Yeah, and Andy, I thought of you last week when he was running well because you mentioned him on the show last week. It was a great call, and he finished 9th. He was 9th in both stages 1 and 2, but to be honest, he was running better than 9th late in that race. Probably deserved a better finish. And he was in those live betting odds. When I looked at him with about 30 to go, Reddick was one of the top guys in there. So he's definitely a guy that's an under-the-radar pick once again this week, and he showed last week well at Texas. You mentioned those other tracks. Definitely a play-on guy. That could be a sleeper pick, a long shot pick, head-to-head pick, however you want to categorize that. Tyler Reddick is a guy to take a look at once again this week. I thoroughly agree. Rocky finished it out with the top 3. You said you're sticking with who you had last week. I don't recall. Did you have Harvick last week as your 3rd pick? We going the double H?
I sure did. I just want to mention Reddick. Definitely, he's been really consistent lately. I think that's a good pick, Andy. But yeah, Kevin Harvick made my top 3 again this week. He is a non-playoff driver, but he's actually been pretty decent here lately. And here at Kansas, he has 3 wins, 11 top fives, 18 top tens in 31 races here. Average finish of 9.1 at this track, which is the best among all active drivers. And over the past 3 years here, he has 1 win, 4 top fives, 5 top tens in those 7 races, an average finish of 6.1. And he also has the best driver's rating here in Kansas over the past 3 years. So I'm looking for Harvick to mix it up with the playoff boys up front.
Yeah, and last week he finished 5th. He was 4th after the second, barely top. Been the best driver the last 49 races on these type of tracks. However, he's not been quite the same this year. So we'll see. But he was a solid top 5 car last week. And we're definitely getting more value with him than we used to get. That's for sure. Kevin Harvick, Hamlin, and Kyle Busch are the 3 Rockies looking at this week. Andy, you've mentioned Keselowski, Reddick, both a little bit of long shots, I think you could say. Who's somebody else you're looking at that might have value?
Well, one thing I think we can clearly take away from Reddick and Harvick as well is these aren't guys that are going to pull over and let the playoff guys go through. That message was loud and clear last week. So, when you're handicapping and you see guys like Reddick and Harvick, you just know if Harvick's running up in the top 5, he's not going to scoot over. So, somebody like Truex can get on through. So it bodes well when you're supporting someone like Harvick. I have to throw Kyle Larson in there. He's won 3 out of the last 4 non-restrictor plate races. Very chalky. I think he was plus 240 to win, which in the playoffs is pretty incredible. But he's just he's the best right now. And He's just winning all of his head-to-head matchups, and it's crazy because, initially when I look at some of his head-to-head matchups, it's like, well, he's minus 170 over Kyle Busch, and you're like, you can't lay that kind of juice, and then he goes out and wins, and you're like, it was only 170. Why didn't I lay that? That was an easy win. So he's just in a tier all by himself right now. So we got to throw him in as somebody that pretty much has to be a part of your betting card and your fantasy lineups.
Yeah, this guy's led at least 95 laps or more in 8 of the last 11 intermediate tracks, and he's led basically 103 or more in 7 of those 11. So, I mean, it's not like, even when he doesn't win the race, he's been one of the best 1 or 2 cars every single time. I guess the question becomes, he doesn't have to win now. I mean, maybe that's a concern, but also he has nothing to lose, so he probably wants to win because, it's just. And also, you get an extra playoff point if you win a stage or two. So it's another reason for him to push it there, even if it costs him late. The only concern, I guess, would be a teammate scenario. Chase Elliott, though, is the only one remaining. Once again, as we've talked about, Byron and Bowman are on the outside looking in. They're good on these tracks, but they don't have anything to gain playoff-wise. Chase Elliott is currently 5th, 8 points behind Kyle Busch. Got to figure he's got to be a little conservative. The guy that has to win, by the way, is Joey Logano. He's really hurting. He's dead 8th right now. Really far out. Logano basically has to win this week or next. So it's just something to keep in mind as we're handicapping the playoff scenario. By the way, Blaney's sitting 2nd now. We didn't mention him yet. As I talked about earlier, he was my 4th driver in the pay-to-play for nothing NASCAR contest, and Hamlin was my cut there. And Blaney ran well again last week. Blaney's, fire or ice, right? I mean, he's one of the fastest cars for years now on these tracks, but finds a way not to win normally. So Blaney's someone else I'll mention. And speaking of maybe long shots, we've mentioned Reddick. Obviously, he qualifies. Rocky, who's somebody else you're thinking about here? I know you agree with Reddick as well. Who's somebody that could be a little bit of a spoiler?
Well, when I looked at the odds to win, this guy stood out big time to me. And when you think long shot, as far as I'm concerned, 25 to 1 or better than that is probably like a long shot, in my opinion. So the guy that stood out, he's a playoff driver. Joey Logano, you just mentioned him. They've got him at 25 to 1 odds to win this race. And I feel like he's going to be up front. I mean, he runs good here in Kansas. He has 3 wins, 8 top 5s, 9 top 10s in his 24 races here. Average finish 17.4 at this track, which isn't that good. But over the past 3 years here, he does have 1 win, 2 top 5s, 3 top 10s in those 7 races with an average finish of 13.7. So he's gotten better here in recent years. So I'm looking for Logano to mix it up front this weekend.
Yeah, and Logano's never been afraid to have the wreckers or checkers mentality, and he has to have that now. So he's going to basically be a bulldozer with anybody in front of him. So he'll be going for the win, to say the least. Obviously, in a head-to-head, that'd be a little bit of a concern, but I do think as a long shot win, it makes a lot of sense. Andy, maybe so you mentioned Reddick. You were spot on with him last week. You like him again this week. Who's somebody else that has some value?
That's tough to find sleepers and scroll down the list at a track like this, but you might take a look at Matt DiBenedetto. Average finish of 9.5 the last 2 races, 13th at Texas. You see him pop up at places like Michigan and Texas and Atlanta. Every once in a while you see him, so he might be a decent one. I'll tell you someone to fade. Ryan Newman has just fallen off a cliff. 6 straight races with no finishes inside the top 20. So if you're looking at somebody to fade in head-to-head matchups, he's just really, really been terrible. Nowhere near the front. Just been involved in a lot of non-competitive finishes, finishing a couple laps down. So sleeper, maybe Matt DiBenedetto, but I can't say I'm very passionate about that. But I am passionate about fading Ryan Newman, as he's shown us basically nothing. So maybe if you get a matchup like Matt DiBenedetto versus Ryan Newman, or maybe a Chris Buescher versus Ryan Newman, that would be a real good one for me.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, to play against guys, as we talk about every week, Rocky, is as good as a play on, especially for the head-to-heads, and someone you might want to leave off your mid-tier fantasy card. I know Newman has always been a popular pick in that $6,000-$7,000 price range, so I would leave him off, as Andy's saying. Rocky, who's a play against guy for you this week at Kansas?
I'm going to keep it simple. Fade Bubba again. He's just been bad here. No wins, no top 5s, no top 10s in 7 races here at Kansas. Average finish is 27.7 at this track. Just looking, they're going to have him matched up probably with maybe 3 or 4 drivers. So we'll look to see who those are and check the lines out and look to fade Bubba again.
Yeah, Fade Bubba, if it's not a restrictor plate track, has worked very well throughout the years, including this season as well. And he tried to go 3 wide. Corey Andy nominated that instantly in our YouTube comments that weekend, saying that's an instant nominee for the Ricky Stenhouse Jr. trying to go 3 wide. And then he checks up. Actually, basically checking up is what caused that, because Bubba got apprehensive when he went 3 wide. He wasn't ready to do it. So yeah, fade Bubba Wallace, fade Ryan Newman, and those are mid-tier price fantasy guys that you want to leave out of your lineups and you want to look to play against in head-to-head matchups as well. Andy, I'll throw it back to you for a free play. The prop master, Andy Lang, WagerTalk.com. He specializes in props, whether it be football, basketball, baseball, even some hockey, I believe, MMA action, and of course, NASCAR. Check out Andy's packages and props at WagerTalk.com, on Twitter at Bump Sports. Andy, give us a sample of free play for this Kansas race.
Well, it's a guy that both Rocky and I are fading, and we kind of had a funny back and forth about him. On DraftKings, I can play it right now, and I'll play Christopher Bell over Alex Bowman. Christopher Bell, 3 straight top 10 finishes. Bowman, just the slump continues. He was involved in the accident, and it's just when it rains, it pours kind of thing. You know, he just can't quite get out of his own way, and then somebody else gets in his way, and then it just bad finish after bad finish. And Christopher Bell's been really good. He's another non-playoff guy that has been racing well recently, and I know we've been high on Christopher Bell for a lot of races most of the year, but yeah, you got to take Bell over Bowman. And I did not to go back to the Penske cars in the top 10. I got no response from DraftKings on that prop, so I still don't have a direct answer, but I know it hit again, and it's now down to minus 250 still for more Penske drivers to finish inside the top 10 than Stewart-Haas drivers. So I would have loved to have come on here and said, hey, this is what DraftKings has said, but I got nothing.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, reading that, obviously it's more drivers. I would think that's minus a half, if you're taking it literally. So just to be safe, assume that's, and I think that's what the odds should be. I mean, obviously it's a slam dunk if you win. If you push on an even amount of cars, I don't see any possibility of that happening. But yeah, Blaney, Kozlowski, Logano gets you done with Penske there, so that makes a lot of sense. And Rocky, I'll close it out with you. Rocket Man Sports on Twitter. Of course, sportsmemo.com is where you get Rocky's football, baseball, basketball best bets. He samples some hockey as well. And of course, NASCAR, sportsmemo.com. Rocky, give us a free play for this weekend.
Yeah, like Andy said, we're fading the same guy here. We're going back to fading Bowman here this week. I'm going to take Keselowski to finish ahead of Bowman. Keselowski has 2 wins, 7 top 5s, 13s here in 23 races. Average finish is a very good 11.3 at this track over the past 3 years here. He has 1 win, 4 top 5s, 5 top 10s in those 7 races. Average finish of 7.0, which is 3rd best, only behind Chase Elliott and Kevin Harvick. On the other hand, Alex Bowman, no wins, 2 top 5s, 5 top 10s in 12 races here. Average finish of 18.1 at this track. I'm going to take Keselowski to finish ahead of Bowman this weekend.
Once again, Keselowski over Bowman, a playoff racer against a non-playoff driver, an angle that we all like to look at in NASCAR. Hey, everybody, enjoy the race this Sunday. We'll be back next week. We got 2 to go, Martinsville and then Phoenix. Don't forget, subscribe to Wager Talk TV. Click the like button and leave us comments below. Let us know who you like this weekend in the race. Get Rocky Atkinson's best bets, sportsmemo.com. Get Andy Lang and myself, Steve Merril, at WagerTalk.com. Best of luck. Enjoy the race and check back every day right here on Wager Talk TV.